Raphael Bob-Waksberg, you are the creator of the magnificent, wonderful Netflix series Bojack Horseman. And to our viewers, you are seeing Raphael in all his glory, and it's not bad. I'll tell you that. Where did the idea for this show come from? Did you hear me there? Where did the idea for this show come from?
Where did the idea of this show come from? When I first moved out to Los Angeles, and I came here from New York, and I was staying like a friend of a friend of a friend's place up in the Hollywood Hills. Like, I don't know how I got this deal, but it's this beautiful house, not dissimilar from the house that Bojack lives in. And I was spending like, I think $600 a month to basically live in a closet. Rumors that it was like the third highest elevated house in all of Hollywood, and that Johnny Depp had once lived there. And I got in a car accident like immediately, and I was stuck up there and I had nowhere to go or no way to get around. And I also didn't know anybody. I just moved to Los Angeles, and I remember, sitting on that hill over the city, and feeling like I was like literally on the top of the world, but I never felt more alone and isolated. And that was kind of the beginning of the character. Guy who's had every opportunity for success, but still can't find a way to be happy. That was the original impetus of the idea.
So what I'm curious was it when you originally started planning the show, was it always your idea that this would be something that would really ride the line between comedy and tragedy?
Yeah, I mean, that was the original pitch. I went into Netflix. I said, I kind of want to trick people with this show a little bit. I want to start off like kind of your typical animated comedy. People are going to watch. They're going to think they know what they're getting into, and then gradually, over the course of the first season, it's gonna slowly transform into something else. And it's going to kind of get its hooks into you and get kind of sadder and darker as it goes. And so by the end of the first season, you're sitting there going, "Oh my God, I care about these characters. How did that happen? I don't remember that." And that was going to be like kind of our trick. And I even said, I think in the pitch meeting, I compared it to Girls or Louie or even Mad Men, these kind of like serious shows that still have their comedy moments and still can be very funny and lighthearted, but also have this deep well of melancholy underneath. And that was kind of the plan from the beginning, was to go to those places. And I think one thing we found in the making of the show is that the more we do it, the darker we can get. And our audience has kind of followed us, which has been really cool. And that we can take bigger risks and do interesting things. Like in season 3, we do some things that I don't think we'd be able to do in season 1. And that's been really exciting to kind of watch the show evolve and evolve the show and try new things with it and go to different places.
So how do you manage the balance between comedy and tragedy that happens within the story? Is it a conscious effort where you might say to yourself, things are a bit too dark here, so we may need to throw in a gag or something like that?
Yeah, I think part of it is you just kind of like get on the surfboard and you kind of like feel it out as you go. You know what I mean? But one thing I think we were really surprised to learn early on, as we were kind of getting into the meat of the show and what it could be, is that I think our first instinct was like, we have to kind of keep this thing of a whole somewhat. The entire range of the spectrum of what this show can be can't be too far apart, or our audience. And kind of the more we did it, the more we realized that the opposite was true. That the wackier and more cartoony we went with it, then also the more dramatic and serious and heartrending we could go as well. And that these things these flavors complemented each other, like salty and sweet, and that you could have a scene that was like really dark and sad, and in like a live action show would make you want to slit your wrists. But because it's these talking animals, standing in front of a sign that has like a goofy animal pun on it, it kind of makes the whole thing feel lighter and more palatable. And so we've been really, I think, pleasantly surprised the more we go, that we can go really dark and we can go really wacky sometimes, at the same time.
So one of the other, in addition to how brilliantly the show is written, it falls upon that amazing cast that you have in the show. And there are a couple cast members I want to name off and see how they got involved with the show. And the first, of course, is Will Arnett as Bojack. How did he come to be involved with the project?
We have this amazing casting director, Linda LaMontagne, and she's incredible people for us. And the only answer to how she does it is she's amazing. And she just knows where to look and who to ask. And also, I think, even from the beginning, we were trying to do something different with the show and with the script that I think appealed to people. And I think Will Arnett really kind of lacked comedy of it, but also the melancholy of it really early, and kind of understood like, oh, this is a different kind of character for me. It's kind of in my wheelhouse, but I can play some different colors with it. I think he was really excited by that. I think also I met with Mitch Hurwitz right when I was joining the Netflix family. He kind of took me out to lunch and said, welcome. It's wonderful here. And he told me that when they were filming Arrested Development, Will had showed script and said, should I do this? Is this funny? Mitch said, yeah, I think this is funny. You should do it. So I think I have Mitch to thank for getting Will involved.
Well, that actually makes perfect sense.
And he's also, let me just say, he's an incredible actor, and we're so blessed to have him. I always say that there are three kinds of actors, I think. The actors that are about as good as the material you give them, and if you give them really good stuff, they'll be really good. And there are actors who always are not. It's a bummer when you're hearing them and going like, oh, this line was so funny, but they didn't quite spin it right. And I think all of our cast, and Will is definitely like the leader of that you can give him a funny line and he'll knock it out of the park. You can give him the setup to someone else's joke, he'll make the setup just as funny. And you can also give him really dramatic stuff and he'll find the weight of that as well. So it's just been an honor as we kind of discovered the show and wrote more for him, kind of like, can you do this? Yes, you can do that. Oh, let's push and see what else we can give him. He's a joy to write for.
So another actor that I think is really interesting, and it's probably my favorite storyline that's ever been done on the show, is the resurrection of J.D. Salinger. So I'm wondering, how did that storyline come about, and whose idea was it to get Alan Arkin for that? Because that was so perfect.
Sorry, you're talking about J.D. Salinger? You cut out for a second.
Oh yes. I'm talking about where did the idea for the J.D. Salinger?
So that was, we were doing the second season. We wanted to do a storyline where Princess Carolyn can kind of, prove herself and like how amazing she is. And, the story we came up with was there's gonna be this mad dash for clients. And so we're kind of playing around with like, who could Princess Carolyn get in her wheelhouse that would really be exciting and really be like undeniably a big win for her to get. And so we started talking about like, what if there was like some hermit or like someone who's really like off the beaten path that everyone kind of assumes, oh, like, that person will never come back to show business. Princess Carolyn, and one of our writers, Peter Knight, I think it was, we were talking about this, and he's like, I gotta say, like I feel like this is familiar. I've seen this before. We have like the J.D. Salinger type, and then like the agent has to go to like Bumblefuck, Michigan or wherever. And I feel like the only way this would be like fresh or interesting is if it's actually J.D. Salinger. And so I was like, well, why can't it be? Let's just do that. And so then we made an offer, and he's a phenomenal actor and very serious about it. He actually was one of the few actors who called me beforehand and he wanted to talk about the character. He didn't want to just like show up and like do his bit. He wanted to like kind of figure out like, where is this guy coming from? What is he thinking? What is he feeling? And so he really took it very seriously, and I that character. And even as you're listening, you can go like, "Oh yeah, this is like a serious guy in this wacky, crazy cartoon universe."
That just makes me. I cannot tell you how much joy just thinking of that brings me. It is such a brilliant piece of casting and just such a great storyline. The way that ends up. He knew J.D. Salinger is the other funny part of this. Seriously?
He I guess he lived in the same town as him for a little bit. Kind of a quiet guy. And so he had like a real take on him and a real, wouldn't know if it's really an impression because it still sounds like Alan Arkin. And he definitely put a lot of thought into how he was characterizing the character based on his real experience with the real J.D. Salinger.
Oh my God, that just makes it even better.
Yeah.
The other brilliant piece of casting on there is Margo Martindale playing character actress Margo Martindale.
Mhm.
Did you always have it in there as that celebrity, and were you just intending to get someone else to voice it, and you just thought, why not send it out to her to see if she would do it?
Well, I'm trying to remember because that was season 1, and that was like really early, where like no one had heard of us, and we couldn't, get some of the names that we can get now. Because now, people have seen or they've heard about it, they can at least watch it. But back then we really had nothing, nobody going for us, and we thought, oh, this will be like funny if we introduce this character, you don't quite know who it is, and then later in the episode it's revealed that it's actually a character actress that's a friend of Bojack's that's like pulling off this plot for him. As we brainstormed a little bit about who would be, the best character actor for that, I think at first we were talking about going like more obscure. We thought like it wouldn't be funny if it was a name that you didn't really recognize, but then you like Googled it and you're like, oh, that lady, someone who's been in like tons of, never really gotten her due. But then when we thought about it, like, oh no, I think it'd be funnier if it was someone that was kind of a little more established than that it felt like, oh, that is kind of a get. I didn't know, like, oh, that's really funny that she's doing this cartoon. And so then Margo Martindale came up, and then as soon as we heard that name, like, oh, this is a fun name to say, Margo Martindale. And also we thought we could get her because she was doing the Millers at the same time as Will Arnett. He'll be on set, he can just say, hey, Margo, you want to come do my other show with me? And I think because she knew she had to see Will every day and get out of this, he's never going to let it go and was like, go do his other show. And then, she came to the table read, and really funny because, this was like our 4th episode, and then our 9th episode she came in for. And by that point, we're writing the script and we're familiar with all the characters, and we're not really thinking about like, how do we explain this to people who are just coming in, because of course with the Netflix model you don't really have to, but you kind of by that point all the characters. But a lot of our guest stars, especially in the first season, didn't know what was happening. And so the day after the table read, she was back on the Millers with Will, and she said, I had such a great time, that was so much fun, what a fun show. That Mr. Peanut Butter character, he has some real dog-like qualities, doesn't he? And Will said, well, Margo, you know the premise of the show, right? She said, no, he's animals. I'm a horse. And she said, oh, and she didn't know that because nobody had explained it to her what was going on, other than she was playing herself as a friend of Will's character. So that was really funny.
What is it like to see her in the recording booth? I've always wondered what it's like, because I remember like the episode with the break-in at the Nixon Library when she's shooting at the police officers and yelling at them, going, "You sons of bitches! This is for John Carroll Lynch's CCH Pounder." I just like, is it as much fun to see her doing that as it is to listen to her?
Oh, it's more fun. It's a dream. It's like the best part of my job. The best parts of my job is getting to see these actors who I love deliver these crazy, ridiculous lines of dialogue we've written for them. And then also, some of them, we do all the crazy lines of dialogue. Then we say, can you make some animal noises now? So like, I remember one of the first people we had in the booth was Keith Olbermann. So we did it over the phone. But he, recorded this Tom Jumbo Grumbo character as we'd written it. And he does all the lines, and then I'm sitting there and I'm going, hey, Keith, that was fantastic. It was all great. Can we get you making some whale noises now? And so he starts going, and I'm thinking like, that's Keith Olbermann making whale noises for me. And that's like, George Bush, have you no shame? It's like, that's him. And he's doing this ridiculous thing for me. And that's when I knew this is going to be a really fun show to work on.
That is one of my other favorite pieces of casting. His Tom Jumbo Grumbo is. I always look forward to those to those bits every season, and I'm glad he stuck around for it. So I was wondering, so in this in the third season of the show, you guys had a really standout episode with I think it was episode 4 called "Fish Out of Water." What was this is an episode that is basically completely devoid of dialogue, and it got a lot of recognition. I think Time Magazine named it the best episode of television in 2016. Yeah, they named it number one, and I think a couple other outlets named it the best episode of television last year, which Lord knows we needed after everything that happened last year. I was wondering, what was the process of coming up with that episode and then executing that idea?
Yeah. It kind of came from two different places at once. One was, we were telling this story about, the Oscar campaign season in general. And so, we were looking for new kinds of ways we could tell the stories about Bojack campaigning for stuff, going to film festivals, doing interviews. I want to make sure we talk about that more because I think this is Gold Derby, so we got to talk about the Oscar stuff because that's right to your audience.
Oh, we'll get to it. Don't worry.
But for that episode specifically, one thing we'd always wanted to do, I think back from season 1, our supervising director Mike Hollingsworth, he was really, and we explore this underwater world, and we'd hinted at it before, like we'd seen like a cruise ship and like a ladder going to a dock and then another ladder going to the water and like climbing up the ladder onto the cruise ship. So we knew there was a society down there, and what would that be like? And I was always very resistant how to show it. Like none of our characters can breathe underwater. Why would our characters be underwater? And even once there, how would they, communicate with each other? And then, obviously, we're always looking for new forms to do on the show, different formats, different ways of telling story. And so I kind of about like, wouldn't it be cool to do a silent episode with no dialogue? Because we have these amazing animators and these incredibly rich, expressive characters. And also, I think, honestly, because our voice cast is so good, at this point, you've really kind of imprinted the voices on the characters. So you can actually just show Bojack making a face and you'd still hear Will's voice and you kind of know what he was thinking. So that would be like a really fun experiment. But then at the same time, justify it. Like, how would you, like, I didn't want to just be this like weird effect where all of a sudden we're like in a silent movie and everyone's like dancing around like Charlie Chaplin. So I had to figure out like that would fit this form. And so I had these two questions, and then one night in the middle of the night, I kind of woke up and was like, Eureka, these two questions answer each other. I go, okay, let's tell this underwater story where nobody talks, and we're kind of following Bojack as a stranger in a strange land. And that was the beginning. It was totally different than anything we'd done before, because most of our episodes are very dialogue driven. We write the script, and then we record the dialogue, and we kind of animate. But this was kind of in this free form where we didn't have the dialogue, and we just had the story, and the animators kind of had to time it out. So first we had Jordan and Elijah wrote the episode, and they're writers, and they figured out how to write an episode of television without dialogue, and they kind of like held the script in their hands, like, this feels about long enough. Normally our scripts are about 35 to 40 pages. I think this was like 20 pages, and it was all stage direction. Then our director, Mike, read through it and kind of acted it out on his own just to time it out, just to see how long will this take, because we didn't want to have like a super long episode, then we're working hard to animate. So we actually said, after that, we had a meeting, he said, I think this is too long, we can cut a couple sequences. And we took a couple sequences out, and then they just started animating to the script. And it ended up being this episode to make. It was the longest to produce because it was all new characters, all new backgrounds, but also, because the visuals were so important, because there was no dialogue, we really wanted to make sure all of our animators felt really proud and like could do their best. And so they ended up kind of wrapping over the whole season working on this one episode. And the final piece, which I think really makes it sing, is Jesse Novak, our composer, created this beautiful score for it. So you kind of, as you're watching, you're listening, and the waves of the music are covered, and you feel like you're transported to this other place. So those are all the pieces, and I think it's the best example of kind of the collaboration of everybody working together, and I'm really proud of it. I think it's a really beautiful episode of television.
It absolutely is. I cannot tell you how jarring it was once it set in what it was doing. And I wasn't at any point like, oh, they're going to do this. I was just, I'm so invested with the show that I'm willing to go along with anything that it does. And so I was just mesmerized the whole time watching it for the first time. And then, of course, because I have to watch the season twice to pick up on everything and fully absorb it. It's still good the second time around. It's still amazing to watch. So you brought up.
Thank you. Well, one thing we try to do with every episode is we want to fill it with layers so that you can watch it over and over again. It's part of the idea because it's it's on Netflix. You have the control over it. You can just watch it again right away. So we love hearing that people season and they watch it again and they pick up on all these other background jokes and background characters and things they missed the first time. But also, I think the drama of it too is it's like subtle and like character dynamics that maybe you don't pick up on the first time that you watch the second time and you appreciate the foreshadowing or you appreciate, oh, she's acting this way because 4 episodes earlier her friend said this to her and it's just finally starting to kind of dawn on her what it means. And that's been really encouraging and exciting as well to see people pick up on that stuff and that people are noticing that, and it's really been wonderful.
So you alluded to this earlier. So the whole 3rd season was about the Oscar campaign and the rigors of what people do to to secure that Oscar nomination. And yeah. I'm wondering. So what's interesting about this is how it played out on the show, because a couple months ago at the actual Oscars, we had something that was insanely reminiscent of this. And did you have any role in, like, I'm wondering, when this whole thing where season 3 spoiler, you should have seen it by now. And if you've made it this far and you haven't watched season 3, go do it. Seriously.
Go watch it. What are you waiting for? That's much more interesting than this interview. Go watch the show, damn it.
You heard it from the man himself. But so Bojack initially hears that he's nominated for Best Actor for Secretariat, and he's going nuts, and he's having this huge hedonistic party. But then he finds out that Mr. Peanut Butter initially lost the envelope that had the nominees in it, and instead just came up with all the nominees on a whim, and mistakenly said that Bojack was nominated when in fact he was not. But it's worth noting that he got the rest of them right. Exactly.
Like Bojack is the one snub that he missed.
Exactly. He was like, if we were to correlate it to this year, he was the equivalent of Amy Adams. Everyone thought it would happen, and then it was like, wait, what? So we had the infamous envelope mishap at this year's Oscars. I'm wondering what was going through your mind when you saw or found out what happened at the Oscars, at the actual Oscars this year. Did that just like blow you away that you had foreshadowed this?
Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy thing, I think, for everybody, even if you don't write a show where a similar thing occurred, it feels a little bit, I think, like when you're writing on a political show and then you have this crazy election in real life and you're thinking like, oh my God, how that, where it feels like, okay, our show is absurd and, we're trying to think like, what's the goofiest, wackiest, out there scenario we can, and then, when real life matches that or tops that, it's like, oh, well, of course, like, of course, in this crazy, the real world would just kind of lap our own, wacky imaginations. But that story actually of how nominated and he doesn't, that was a real fun story to play around with, because I think, every TV writer kind of longs to do sometime it too. And then we got to tell 2 stories at once. We got to tell the story of what happens when he gets nominated and how that affects him. And we also got to tell the story of him realizing he didn't get nominated and how that affects him. So it was really kind of a beautiful moment when the writers came up with it. I think I was out of the room, and I came back, and Vera, who wrote the episode, kind of pitched me through, and was like, here's what's going to happen. And I was flabbergasted. Like, that's amazing. That's so fun. That's great. And it was really fun to work on that episode and to kind of play up, the which I think anyone could predict, the kind of feeling of, oh my God, I got nominated. This is the thing I've been wanting, and it doesn't make me happy. How does that feel? Put past that to, I don't care, it doesn't make me happy. I'm going to decide it does make me happy, and I'm going to, party my face off. To not nominated, all that was a lie. Everything that's been going through my head for the last 12 hours has been garbage. And what does that mean? The last 6 months of this Oscar campaign have all been for nothing. And what does that mean? And where does that leave me? And, who am I now that I don't have that, the thing that I wanted? Or all those different colors of the awards season and the feelings that you might get if you are in contention for a big award.
I'm wondering, did you know a lot about the whole Oscar campaigning thing before you started to brainstorm how this past season would go? And if not, when in your research, what did you find like the most absurd thing about Oscar campaigning?
Well, it's I didn't do a lot of research because I do follow it, and I think just part of living in Los Angeles and kind of being around, boards go up every campaign season, and I think also just because since I was a kid, I was a fan of movies and television shows, the Oscars, and I enjoyed watching all the interviews and the build up to it. But kind of the more I'm ensconced in it, the sillier it feels, and now it's very odd for me personally, because we just did this whole season of television about like the central theme of the season. Awards don't matter; they won't make you happy. They're these false idols. Focus on your the whole thing is a sham and a joke and a farce. And then off of that season, I'm now doing interviews with goldderby.com and sitting on panels and trying to like sell myself as like, hey, give us an Emmy, like, hey, awards, why can't we have one? And it's really hard to muster up, like, do I care about this? And I don't want to like act too cool and say I don't care, because I kind of care, but I don't want to care. But also maybe it's okay to care a little bit if you know that it doesn't mean anything. But then why are we doing any of it? It's very strange. It's I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk to you. I'm enjoying this conversation, even if I am taking care of other business at the same time. But it's an odd to experience it, and I even know I'm only experiencing it in the smallest, tiniest way. To talk about like, hey, vote for us for best animated TV show versus these actors who are thrown in front of the camera like over and over and over again and have to talk about their process and how they found the character and what it would mean for them to win this award. And it's exhausting. People that you see do these interviews and like plug the show and plug themselves and like work themselves in a lather and like make themselves care. Most of their job is doing that, right? Like they're on set for like a couple months and then they're like on the campaign trail for 6 months. And it's not the reason that, and it's exhausting, but I also think very interesting and very funny. And so that's kind of where the season came from a little bit. Let's explore that and kind of show how phony and unnecessary it all is, but also how you want it. And you can't, even if you know it doesn't, can't control the fact. I think that's interesting.
It's definitely, yeah, and I love how the show, I'm one of those people who, I'm so invested in this type of thing where I'll watch something and, if they get something wrong about the Oscars or something like that, I will lose my shit at the television, even though it can't talk back and it can't hear me. But, even like stuff that with this one, I was willing to just put aside the exaggerations because the spirit of it is, it's in that right wheelhouse. And I say that as someone who's a fan of the process. So what's interesting here is you've made some interesting choices with your submissions for the Emmys the past 2 years. I believe the past 2 years you submitted the penultimate episodes of the season. The big drug-induced writing session that Bojack has in season 1 was your submission. In season 2, it was the New Mexico episode.
Okay.
Which I thought was a very bold choice. Have you decided?
Too bold, it turns out, for the winners of the Emmys.
But I will say, I mean, if there's hope for your program, I think it was in last year we saw Archer finally win. You know, here's another show that just for years it just did not get nominated, and now it finally got nominated and won, which I think is great. So, I'm wondering, have you chosen the episode that you want to submit to the Emmy voters this year?
Yes, I think so. We're actually submitting a couple different categories because we're submitting Fish Out of Water. Then we're also submitting some of the other episodes for the Writing Awards for Best Writing for Comedy. And which episodes we're submitting, but very good ones, I'm sure. And I think, we still haven't quite cracked how to do this. We're still figuring it out. And we haven't cracked how much we care and do we want it, and is it worth it to keep submitting in this animated category? Would it be worth it to try to submit for Best Comedy? Not that I think we could crack that necessarily, but I still the only way I can enjoy it is kind of like as an experiment. I'm like, ooh, what if we try this, or if we submit this year, or what if we submit only one, or what are the different adjustments we can make to get people to notice us and pay attention?
Well, I think. Oh no,
it's
go on.
Very. What's that?
Oh no, go on.
It's a strange thing to do. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you interview a lot of people. You must have these conversations of like what would an Emmy mean, and how would it change your why do you ask people like, do you want an Emmy, or is that like just assumed that they do?
I've never really asked like I may have asked like what does it mean. I'm always more interested in the experience. So I've always asked, what's the experience like for people that are winning? A couple of months ago, I interviewed Matt Thompson from Archer and asked him about what it was like to actually win, and it's interesting always to hear people talk about that story of what it's like when this insane moment happens and you have to go up and we're all experiencing this together. He was saying that that his only goal was to find the steps at the Microsoft Theater. That was his only goal after getting out of his seat, because he still couldn't quite process what was happening. And then there's some other legendary stories, like Whoopi Goldberg was stoned when she won her Oscar, and she was awesome. But I think that's how I've always approached it.
Mm-hmm. I guess I could get it. Yeah, if I get nominated, I'll get a nice story out of it. I guess even being there would be fun. Because I was always the first to say, I don't care about any of this. None of it matters. It's all silly. Why does anyone want these things? But then we won an award. We got a Critics' Choice Award last year, and then to hold that in your hands and you go, ooh, I like this. I got a little buzz off of this thing, and like now I get it. Now I'm like, ooh, give me that crack. I want more of that good feeling. I think I get it. I'm not turning my nose up at the whole prospect of it. I guess it would be a fun thing to have. Sure. It'd be fun, it's an honor just to be considered to be nominated, as they say.
And just that's a very ringing endorsement for the Critics' Choice Awards. Critics' Choice, it's like crack in a statue form.
What's that?
I said it's like crack in a statue form.
Yes, I believe it is. But yeah.
I think that should be their slogan.
Yes, that would be great.
Well,
all the uses for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Raphael, I cannot begin to thank you enough for this. When do we? Last question: do we know when season 4 is going to come out yet?
What's that?
What was that you just had there?
I was just scratching my back. Yeah.
You keep your Emmy.
You
You keep an Emmy in the bathroom?
Oh no, it's my girlfriend's. I was just using it. Sorry, I didn't mean to. What were you saying?
You keep it she keeps it in the bathroom?
Well, she's not home right now. When my back was itchy and I needed something long and sharp. So,
those wingtips stay very sharp.
They do. It's very helpful.
I cannot be. This has been like one of the craziest interviews I've ever had, but I've loved every moment of it. And do we know when season 4 is going to come out yet?
We don't yet, but I think we will soon. Watch this space. I think in a matter of weeks, I think we should be making an announcement because we're almost done making it, and we're really to share it with people.
All right. Well, I'm not going to ask anything about what happens because I just want to be surprised, like I was with the past 3 seasons.
Me too.
I know it's going to be. I just know it's going to be great, and I just can't wait for it. So, Raphael, all the best to you during this Emmy season, and thank you so much for talking with us.